Awakening to Love, a 5-MeO DMT trip report, posted to the Actualize.org forums by Kingston, March 25th, 2023. Yesterday, I finally had the courage to try 5-MeO at 40 milligrams. Since 30 milligrams only produces a moderate trip for me, my intuition told me I needed to go higher. So after plugging around 7:50 PM, I calmly sat on my bed and waited for the effects to kick in. After 7 or 8 minutes, the effects had finally kicked in, and I started having an uneasy feeling of nausea. I wanted to vomit, but as my consciousness arose in the speed of light, I became too conscious to even care to move and vomit. I just lay down on my bed from seating position and closed my eyes. As soon as I closed my eyes, time stopped. I suddenly became conscious that time does not exist. Time is just imagination in this present moment, and this moment is all there is. This moment itself lasted eternity. Time is just one of the many elements that make up our human life. There is never time, there is just now. However, this was just the beginning. As I watched my consciousness significantly increase, I became conscious that all of my sensory fields are literally made of consciousness itself. I don't know how to put it into words. I just felt like all my sensory fields started to collapse, emerged into each other in this spiral sort of fashion. And this was a non-stop force that I, as ego, could not control, which was what finally started to make me afraid and worried. Combining this with the uneasy, nauseous sensations, for the first time during a trip, I begged it to stop. It just became unpleasant, but it was weirdly amazing at the same time. I wondered how this could all be possible, and I was surprised that I never had experienced anything like this during an LSD trip. The fear came. I wondered where all of this would be leading me. This is too much. Then, I realised that the only thing I can do here is to surrender completely. So what actually is the act of surrendering? Well, the act of surrendering is to just face the fear. Face equals give attention to, equals aware of, equals conscious of. So that's what I did. I simply became conscious of my fear, the sensation of fear itself. Then I became conscious that fear itself is also part of consciousness. It's just one little facet of infinite consciousness. Everything is consciousness. The only reason I was afraid was I didn't understand who I really am. I'm not this human self. I am consciousness. Fear is there as a necessity for the existence of this ego to fool myself into thinking I am an ego, and fool me into thinking that there really is something to be afraid of, all in order to stay alive. If everything is consciousness, including fear, my sensations, my current room, my breath, my hands, my thoughts, trees, animals, peoples, drugs, psychedelics, etc., then who am I really? I started to wonder. As I had this realization, my conscious and sensory fields were merging into each other more and more. It was like a never-ending spiral. It was quite amazing to watch all of this happening, and it felt like it would last for an eternity. Finally, the spiral of consciousness consumes every part of me, including the image of myself, as well as my memories, my body, and lastly, my fear. I gave up. I totally gave up. This is the most amazing and yet the most terrifying thing. I died. I literally died. I am gone, but consciousness remains. Then, I realised what all of this collapsing of my ego, the dying process, is all about. This is the process of love. Now, what is love? Love means I'm willing to fully experience suffering, experience fears, because these are a part of my consciousness. The only thing that prevents me from realising love is my fear and my escape and avoidance from it. Love must be total. Love must be a totality. If you don't accept all the things in this world that you hate, you cannot love. What every human being is most afraid of is suffering, fear, torture, and ultimately death. If you cannot accept or love these things, you cannot really love. By loving suffering, fear, and death, it literally means living through these moments, fully experiencing them until the point you realise that you are them because you love them. Love is just the total embrace of everything that is in consciousness, whatever that is good or bad to your human senses. And finally, this spirally emerging process completes. Everything has finally emerged into each other, and all that remains is oneness. What remains is just this conscious field. I'm one. If me equals one, then who am I? Oh my God. As I scream these words out loud, I am God. I'm God. I'm God. I cannot believe it. I just can't believe it. I screamed my lungs out in pure joy and happiness, and while I was realising that I am God, my consciousness started to spirally emerge again. However, this time, my consciousness field is an imagined orgasm, and the sensation of orgasm told me that it loves me. Then, my whole consciousness field is suddenly filled with an orgasm and starts to merge into itself. It is literally like this picture. Imagine each little black circle in this picture, and it represents your most amazing orgasm you ever had during sex. And during this moment, there are literally infinite numbers of orgasms merging spirally into one. It never stops. This is literally the best possible pleasure you would ever encounter. Infinite high, infinite orgasm, infinite love. Oh my God. This is infinite love. I am infinite love. I screamed once again. And this is my peak of realization, my peak of the trip, my peak of pleasure, and it lasts for an eternity. I became love. I am love. Love is an infinite orgasm. While it literally felt like eternity, and it is, as my trip began to end, my consciousness started to go back to my baseline. I fell back into my ego self. Everything slowly returns to normal. However, it left me completely speechless. I'm happy like a child. I cried. I was lying on my comfy bed for quite some time and just stared at my ceiling thinking, I am God. I am love. This is the surest thing I know. Not only do I understand that I am God, I became it. I am it. And God itself is love. A 6.5 gram cubensis trip report, written by a subscriber, taken from the Vivec Discord. Greetings, fellow psychonauts. I've been preparing for this trip for over a month, and let me tell you, it evolved into a celebration of all things human like no other. So buckle up and join me on this mind-bending 6.5 gram cubensis odyssey. With a heart full of anticipation, I cocooned myself within the confines of my apartment, ready to embark on a journey that would delve into the very essence of the human experience. It was just me, my thoughts, and those potent ODPE cubensis shrooms, all converging for an extraordinary celebration of existence itself. To kick things off, I hopped onto a Discord voice chat with my girlfriend and some close friends. Excitement buzzed in the air, as I prepared to plunge into the depths of my mind and explore the unknown, while my friends provided companionship. Prior to this cosmic voyage, I meticulously prepared my mushrooms using a technique known as lemon tech. I ground them into a fine powder, added lemon juice, and soaked them for 20 minutes. This method intensifies the trip. However, I must admit that while consuming the mushroom lemon sludge, I had a couple of close calls where I nearly threw up. Yet, these discomforting moments only added to the anticipation of what lay ahead. As the effects of the mushrooms intensified, I informed my friends that I needed some time alone. With a slightly wobbly ballet, I navigated my surroundings, gathering my essentials: water, Bluetooth speakers, and even a dog cooling mat to combat the sweltering 28-degree heat. My mission? To create the ultimate tripping sanctuary, a space where I could connect with the essence of what it means to be human. In my mother's serene room, I felt ready to unravel the vibrant festivity of the mind. Sunbeams poured through the window, as if the cosmos itself spotlighted a doorway to my mental odyssey. It was like the universe marked this as the ideal spot for my journey through the tapestry of human existence. Now, let's plunge into the whirlwind of thoughts that spiraled through my mind. To the groovy backdrop of 70s classics, I launched my journey with the iconic Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. Settling onto my mum's bed, every inch of it embraced me like a billowy cloud, cradling me in its softness. It was almost as if the very fabric of the bed was woven with comfort, inviting me to groove and let my mind soar. I extended my mind and immersed myself in the luminous embrace, feeling its gentle caress against my skin. It was as if the light possessed a divine essence, a cosmic presence that enveloped me. The once distinct rays of the universal spotlight transformed into intricate fractal geometries, dancing upon my skin and casting mesmerizing reflections. Lost in contemplation, I found myself pondering the mysteries of existence and the vastness of the universe. My gaze rested upon the blue expanse of the wall before me, adorned with arrow-like patterns that appeared to beckon me into a trance-like state, as if inviting me to explore the depths of consciousness. Ideas flowed like a meteor shower, each carrying a fragment of the life puzzle. The thoughts began racing and ramping up quickly, yet I could still follow them. The dance of humanity's existence, a mesmerizing choreography, unraveled before me, defining the essence of being human. In a mesmerizing twist of perception, it seemed as though my consciousness was fragmenting into countless individual versions of myself, each embarking on their distinct journey of experience. Strangely, I retained the ability to intimately connect with the thoughts and emotions of each of these iterations, creating a tapestry of interconnected self-awareness. These thoughts formed a list of easy-to-follow steps, like a string of occurrences weaving together to create a bigger thought. However, the real magic transpired when I relinquished control and allowed thoughts to roam freely. Imagine being in the front row of an exhilarating show, where your thoughts and experiences take center stage. It was like uncovering the gears that compose the magnificent me machine. I could see my thoughts forming like a structured list, each step leading to the next in a graceful dance of cognition. Gradually, I underwent a process of reconstruction, as the myriad individual facets of myself converged harmoniously, piecing together the intricate puzzle of my being to restore a complete and unified me once more. As the effects of the peak gently receded, a familiar sense of self gradually returned. With each passing moment, I found myself reconnecting with the comfort of the known world. Slowly rising from my dreamlike state, I returned to my room and sank into the welcoming embrace of my trusty chair, while the ongoing Discord call hummed in the background. With candid honesty, I exclaimed, "I'm tripping absolute balls." Laughter echoed as my friends acknowledged the wild journey I was embarking upon. My gaze then shifted to one of my friends, whose tattoo transformed into a mesmerizing display of infinite fractal patterns. The tattoo seemed to morph and sway, as if dancing to the rhythm of the universe's heartbeat. The presence of another friend came to life in an awe-inspiring spectacle. As he moved, his form seemed to shift and fragment, revealing a myriad of faces and arms that extended and retracted with each motion. He almost appeared as a multidimensional being, a living testament to the boundless complexity of existence. Amidst this enchanting chaos, my gaze was drawn to the screen where the enigmatic realm of the Big Les show unfolded. The animated tapestry of the show seemed to mirror the dance of my own thoughts, a captivating blend of chaos and insight. Laughter reverberated through the call, as we shared in the amusement of this synchronicity, each of us navigating our own unique tributaries of thought. A sudden idea rushed into my mind. I felt an incredible urge to take my Bluetooth speaker with me. Stripped of inhibitions and clothes, I stepped into the shower. As I turned on the water, its touch felt almost orgasmic. With the 70s music still blasting through my speaker, I began to dance and sing, embracing the euphoria of the moment. During the shower, a thought loop played out multiple times. Intensity, stepping out, and a pull back in. I danced and sang, creating a joyous loop that mirrored the ebb and flow of the human journey. In those moments, I embraced the loop and its repetition, acknowledging that living within such cycles was perfectly okay. As the visuals kicked into high gear, I found myself drawn to the shower. Water droplets danced in harmony, and the walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. In that moment, I had an epiphany. Life's purest joys come from singing and dancing in the shower, embracing the simple, unadulterated bliss. Gazing out of the bathroom window, I was struck by the breathtaking beauty of the world before me. In that moment, I whispered to myself, "This is what being human is all about. Emotions and experiences, this is the innate human experience," I exclaimed. "My existence is a celebration of all things human." Following that, I grooved and belted out tunes in the shower for about another hour, riding the waves of euphoria as the psychedelic embrace gradually loosened its grip, and I began to ease down from the mind-bending journey. With a refreshed spirit, I slipped back into my clothes and returned to my room, where the lively Discord call was still in full swing. I couldn't help but notice that a few more of my friends had joined the voice chat, adding to the cosmic camaraderie. Naturally, I regaled them with the tale of my hour-long, euphoria-infused shower dance, a psychedelic ballet of water and music that had us all erupting into laughter once again. We shared stories, bantered, and found ourselves lost in joviality until the gradual come-down began to make its presence known. As the psychedelic energies gently waned, I decided to enhance the easing transition by indulging in some soothing herbal companionship. A little weed added to the mix, a gesture of appreciation for the privilege of embracing my innate human experience within the tapestry of this wondrous lifetime. Embarking on a 6.5 gram ODP Cubensis Odyssey, I celebrated the essence of being human. Through cosmic rhythms and psychedelic waves, I danced with thoughts and emotions, uncovering the beauty of existence. A shower became a portal to pure joy, a moment of unfiltered bliss and a whisper to the universe. My life is a celebration of all things human. Reuniting with friends, sharing laughter and stories, I gently descended from the cosmic heights, embracing the privilege of this incredible journey. Here's the dance of humanity and the wonder of our innate human experience.
Absolutely Breathtaking, an MIPT and cannabis trip report uploaded by Kaleda from the Blue Light Collection to earwid.org October 21st, 2015. I'm still on this substance as I type this, so please excuse me if anything I say is somewhat difficult to follow. I wanted to get as much of this down as I could while I still remember it. Basically, what I have to say about MIPT is that I was shocked by how great it was for me. I think that's important to get out there now, because most of what I'm going to be doing is just raving about it. This was only my first time with the substance, so I don't know how it will be on repeated use, and I don't know if this was what I could consider a normal experience or anything, but with all that I've considered, it was pretty amazing. I actually want to say, it was definitely one of my best trips I've ever had. My previous experiences with psychedelics include psilocybin mushrooms, LSA seeds, bufotenin, DMT, LSD, 2CB, 2CI, 4-ACO-DMT, 4-HO-MET, 4-ACO-MET, 4-HO-DET, 4-ACO-DET, 4-HO-MIPT, 4-HO-DIPT, 4-ACO-DALT, DIPT, and DALT, and at least a couple of unidentified things like psychedelic amphetamines and suspected TFMPP. Time, 12 o'clock. I was thinking quite a lot about taking this one for the first time the night before, due to me and my friend's recent experiences with DIPT, combined with the fact that I was really feeling the itch to experience something similar to DMT, even if it was not exactly DMT itself. While trying not to set any solid expectations, I was kind of hoping that MIPT would at least have some of the peaceful, easygoing feelings of DIPT for me, while still retaining more DMT-like qualities to it. T plus 0 hours. I get out of bed and immediately take 50 milligrams of MIPT. The taste is much milder than expected from experiences with other synthetic tryptamines, but it's still nasty. I used a fibre cookie to wash it down in hopes that this might also help my stomach later on. T plus 15 minutes. First alerts came in here, a definite tryptamine energy growing up through my body as I move around. I start feeling most tryptamines around this time, so it's not surprising. My first thought is that it does indeed feel similar to DIPT, in that it feels much more heavy than a lot of other tryptamines, less likely to cause things like jitters and shakes. T plus 35 minutes. I've been working through just a little bit of an ordeal here. The body feeling has still remained remarkably easy to handle compared to other tryptamines I'm used to, but despite that, it's still harder to handle than nothing at all, and I do have to talk myself through some things. I could definitely see how people not used to psychedelics could get anxiety from this onset, but it's really quite easy compared to almost anything else that will still feel that intense at the same time. Ultimately, what I start to realise is that this is the build up to a purgative type of trip. I quickly run to the bathroom and release what little I have inside me. There was very little nausea leading up to this, I just knew that it was something that was going to have to happen for me to move forward. I felt much better right afterwards, so much so that I almost thought I wasn't even tripping anymore for a minute or two. T plus 45 minutes. At this point, I decided to take a hot shower and start smoking a bowl of cannabis while I'm in there. This is where things really started to pick up. I could already tell that this feeling creeping up in me was as powerful as from any other hyperspatial tryptamine. My imagination and the edges of my vision were already being flooded with hints of very bright and colourful imagery, completely on the level I would expect from a close analogue of DMT. The visuals in the centre of my vision were less distinct, being mostly blue, green and yellow distortions, but they were honestly still fairly active compared to many tryptamines I've taken. Even DMT honestly doesn't do much more for me than this, with eyes open on most occasions. It's more about what goes on behind them. With this in mind, I closed my eyes to let the water wash over my head, and was immediately shown the very beginnings of visions forming, such as the edges of detailed faces turning to the side through the non-distinct shapes, and immediately got excited for what was to come. Conceivably sometime around 1 hour, though at this point I was in too much of a rush to care, I decided that the shower was a nice effort, but my body was starting to feel overwhelmed from movement like DMT or DIPT, and decided that all I really wanted to do at this point was lie down and meditate, possibly while listening to music. I managed to struggle against the relaxation and the growing sensory garbage flowing in the corner of my eyes enough to dry myself off, as well as do some slight grooming and get back into bed. At that point, I believe I also took a couple more hits of cannabis, and then relaxed into the bed for just a moment. After getting a feel for whether I should guide this trip or let it guide me, I figured that it probably wasn't going to get hugely more intense on its own by this point, and decided that music seemed like an excellent choice for the moment. And wow, how great it was. I started putting on songs I listened to by various female artists, and I immediately noticed a strong music enhancement of the kind I'm used to getting from LSD, and just recently from 4-ACO Dalt. However, that had just been a taste of the same kind of thing. This was easily as great as my best experiences with LSD, if not even sometimes deeper. It reminded me of experiencing music enhancement for the very first time, back in my younger days when cannabis, MDMA, and psychedelics were just wonderful new discoveries to me, and every note of every song sounded impossibly deep and complex, on levels you can't fathom how you never noticed before. It was breathtaking to say the least, but that was only the very beginning of it. Shortly into my first song, the visionary effects of the MIPT really started making themselves known. It started with feeling an empathetic connection to the artist, one of feeling every emotion they sing, while flowing through me as if it was my own, and upon that foundation grew the ability to project entire perceptions into my field of experience. At first I was merely emotionally overwhelmed, and the visions consisted mostly of widely repeated swirling bodies and hands, usually the artist's, but not always. And then they started turning into entities who I could feel guiding me through this powerful feeling. The first song I listened to had a longing, nostalgic, romantic feeling to it, and I felt my perception of my body dissolve until it left only my heart, which was glowing and took on something of a biological clockwork machinery appearance. And suddenly, it was surrounded by loving entities who were holding it up and carrying me through the heavy emotions with feelings of compassion. This allowed me to release myself from them at full force, which sent me more fully into an out-of-body feeling, with watching beautiful, colossal geometric patterns shooting out from myself from a remote perspective, along with my sense of emotional release. Whilst this was happening, I saw my body falling towards the ground up from high in the sky, the clouds rushing by, and seeing my clothes flowing in the wind around me. The next song I listened to was more playful, but I also knew it better, and the visions actually started organising themselves into an actually structured and logical, but still quite psychedelic, music video to play along to it. These things continued on, and I listened to as much music as I could to get the most out of it, as I was really in awe. By now, this really felt equal to me to DMT in terms of realism and intensity, strength of the dose considered, and I found the colouring highly similar to DMT as well, but at the same time, there was also two very distinct qualities to it that DMT lacks for me: a feeling of pushing everything, geometry and visions alike, into hedonistic extremes, which I identified strongly with 4-HOMET, and a very noticeable erotic vibe to the imagery, and female entities which I would describe as burlesque, which I specifically associate with 4-HOMIPT. All of these qualities essentially combine to make it the most intense combination of visual, emotional, and sexual overload I've ever experienced, to the backdrop of music enhancement, which, again, I was enjoying at least as much as LSD. All the while, despite this intensity, mentally I felt extremely calm and collected, with no significant mind load, except for the occasional therapeutic, spontaneous observation about my life or my behaviour, which actually felt extremely deep in their own ways as well. This was definitely what I'd hoped for out of a tryptamine experience. And just to top it all off, aside from still feeling a little too heavy to move comfortably, I had no side effects of any kind, not even some shaking like other tryptamines, but my body in general felt fantastic and slightly electric when I just relaxed into it. I was pretty much in a state of bliss, and I really didn't want it to end. T plus 1 hour and 35 minutes. But alas, it did. By this point I could tell that my music visions were no longer going as deep, and that part of the experience was starting to pass. Most of the open eye visual effects had started fading by this point as well, at least in terms of distortions. My body still felt kind of heavy when I tried to move it, and just a little sweaty and alien like DMT can make me feel, but aside from that, I mostly just still had that lingering body energy, and definitely a good amount of music enhancement still, but not as much as the peak. I used this short time to try to orient myself and think about the start of the day, since I was still technically just lying in bed in the morning. T plus 1 hour and 50 minutes. I still feel positive that most of the heavy tripping is over, and I decided to just keep listening to music for a while. It still sounds deliciously deep. I smoked a little more cannabis by now, but I think it was mostly gone from me hitting it during the visionary phase, being still just that one bowl. T plus 2 hours. Another noticeable drop in intensity, but I still feel good. The body feeling reminds me of a 4-HOMIPT trip at this point, with a little less muscle tension. Music still sounds great. T plus 2 hours and 30 minutes. I first start typing some of this down, but while watching letters appear on the screen as I type them, I see these ancient looking wheel patterns with abstract art faces in them exploding outward from each position, which surprised me, as I'd thought the visuals were mostly gone. I feel a little overwhelmed and decide to do something else for a little while longer first. T plus 3 hours. I ended up eating some cereal because I could tell that my stomach was not happy with me taking a drug whilst it was empty, and then making myself even more empty, and still not replacing it with anything for a couple of hours. I still felt a little funky afterwards and had a brief stomachache, but it has resolved itself not that much later. I also noticed at this point that I had a slight headache like I would have gotten from smoking a bowl of strong cannabis that quickly in the morning without the MIPT, but I very distinctly hadn't noticed it during the peak. This is similar to LSD and most other psychedelics really, as long as they have me feeling good. Now, as I write this, it is 4 hours and 20 minutes in, and I still feel really awesome. My stomach and head now feel fine, and aside from a lingering relaxation from the body high, I have an energy to face things during the day. Overall, my body still feels how I would expect it to feel after 4-HOMIPT, but a little more relaxed. Music is nowhere near as enhanced as it was earlier, but it's still much more than I would have expected it to be from just being high, and I really hope it lasts quite a while though through the day. Visuals, however, are totally absent by now, except for maybe just things like slightly stronger after images or visual snow. Overall, I really have to say that I wasn't expecting this at all. I'd wondered if people were maybe undervaluing MIPT by the dose, but I had no idea it would be like this. It's pretty much exactly what I had hoped for, and then even so much more. If this is actually a consistently reproducible kind of experience on this substance for me, I have very little doubt that it will go on to be one of my favourites, or possibly even just the favourite. I'm compelled to call it that already, but don't allow myself to say such things after a single experience. But I do have to say that this trip gave me an even better first impression than 4-HOMET, which is the only other psychedelic that I currently consider to be hedonistic on a similar level to LSD. In the future, I will consider this dose of 50mg orally as the bare minimum. I imagine that I would start seeing some truly fantastic things at between 75 and 100mg, and very dearly hope to find out someday soon. There's not nearly enough love for this substance around. I personally expect to be singing its praises for a long time to come. Big thanks to Spring Bear for sending over this trip report. I really enjoyed reading your experience. I think it was extremely fascinating and very out there, and I think you guys are going to enjoy listening to it. The following text is an account written on the morning after the 8th of September 2019. Two of my friends, A and J, and myself, all shared an experience in which the I within I manifested externally, and used one of us as a medium to communicate to all three. I'm not asking anyone to believe, nor am I trying to prove anything. I'm just sharing a true experience shared by three individuals. Yesterday, at 4 PM, my friend A and I dosed on LSD. We both ate a different dose, but both of us ate at least 1.5 to 2 doses. I redosed once more maybe 45 minutes later, and A postponed the offer until he felt more comfortable about making a decision to dose more. We began relaxing and letting the medicine do its thing. It was incredibly decompressing and intensively therapeutic on a deeply personal level internally. We went and sat by the pond off in the woods behind the house after laying down for some time. The pond was beautiful and the sunlight basked everything with calm grace. A and I sat there just connecting and expressing with one another and letting ourselves go. I went further and further, but still wanted to go more so. I'd invited another friend, Jay, as well, who had just been returning from vacation, so he was a few hours behind. Jay arrived, I believe, sometime after 7 PM, and at which point we all went inside to dose together. Jay ate 2 very large doses, and A and I about half a dose apiece. We went outside and laid down with the steadily descending sun. We sat, and A told us a funny story from an experience at a movie theatre with his girlfriend. We all died laughing at the idea of a child ridiculously disrespecting his mother in public, which is a foolish thing, but the context was comical, especially when the turning point was that the assumed child brat was a full-grown 30 or so year old man. We all roared with laughter and made our jokes and just grew comfortable in an already cosy situation. We had planned to light a fire when the sun went down, and just before it did completely, some neighbours just randomly walked through the backyard. I addressed them and they ignored me. They were carrying a small boat and stopped to take a pause, at which point I offered to help. The man replied with, "Oh, I didn't see you there," which was obviously a lie, so I replied, "Oh, is that right?" He immediately shot his head down, and him and his buddy booked it on. We shared some words on the audacity of these dudes, but soon just let it go. I started the fire, and I laid down for a bit. I proposed dosing again, so we all ate a bit more. A and I ate about a quarter dose, and Jay another full large too. We all went back outside and gathered round the fire, and conversed about many subjects, primarily our own piecing together of the world around us. This led us to connect and go deeper into conversation, as the LSD dissolved more barriers. After getting a couple of trips of wood with Jay, and then one by myself, we all kind of sat around the fire and began really going far. Jay was the first of us to really break through and begin experiencing ego death. A and I began conversing with him, and we both had experienced a similar sensation a few times individually. We talked with Jay as he made deeper and deeper realizations, and it all seemed to add to the experience for all of us. I remember leaving Jay by the fire and going with A to the garage. He began breaking down some bud, and while doing so, Jay showed up after a while and was still growing in the depth of the experience. I put a guitar in his hands, and then really started to see him open up. We all went back to the fire. A and I sat on the blanket we'd originally laid out earlier, while Jay sat to the right of us playing guitar in the grass. He began to seem sort of dissociated, and talking in third person, saying things that seemed to resonate subtly, though I can't quite yet understand how. A and I smoked the joint to ourselves as Jay declined, and during which my experience completely peaked tenfold. It started slowly and subtly, but more and more, and undeniably, I realised and made connections with what Jay was saying. Connections in ways I never imagined or dreamed. The neighbours were noticeable off in the woods with flashlights, and it made me nervous, and I tried to silence Jay, who didn't seem to want to respond. He seemed to be speaking directly to an internal insecurity of fear and anxiety about the neighbours. The more I put focus into trying to silence Jay, the more high I became, and the more I realised Jay was speaking specifically to me, as if within me. He was addressing these subtle mannerisms, specifically 1 or 2 words that synchronised my thoughts and feeling completely. I eventually accepted what was in front of me, and got up and went to sit next to him. I asked for the guitar, and he gave it back to me. Jay sat in the middle, A to his left, and I to his right. Jay began addressing both of us internally, referencing specific internal things that I wasn't even aware of in my frontal consciousness, or things that I've never shared with anybody. Jay was understanding our thoughts and emotions and speaking directly to them. I saw Jay as a complete part of me that manifested externally, a part of me inside that constantly speaks to me, a voice I specifically recognised coming from an external source and perfectly addressing my thoughts. When I would try to rationalise or put logic on what was happening, I saw myself as having manifested J and A as figments of my imagination, as representations of internal parts of me, that I was them, and they were me completely. I remember sitting with J and A together, and knowing what was going on. We all linked and connected, and God, universe, love, or life, spoke directly through J, specifically to key things within A and myself. At one point, Jay spoke of increasing the flames of the fire, and they did. All seemed possible, as it seemed I had left the reality I knew completely, and was in another plane of existence. A and I ended up getting close to the fire, with Jay behind us, but still perfectly in between. Me and A began having a conversation, while Jay, who sat some 3 or so feet behind us, spoke directly to our thoughts and physical reactions, to the realizations of the given experience. I learnt how I turned the voice of God within myself into an enemy. I spoke that to them as confessing. Jay recalls not even speaking to us in that moment, and not even hearing what we were saying, but both myself and A account for everything he said to specifically address things never expressed or stated externally, as well as guide us through the experience, and aid in focusing on the moment when we would get lost in our minds. I slowly accepted it and began opening up, though my adrenaline and perceptions were throbbing. I remember just feeling an incredible sense of being. I felt as though A and I sat by a campfire with God, and I mean we did. We all can attest to this. I personally had closed my eyes at a specific time and saw within myself all of us linked and connecting. I eventually went in for a moment to check on the dog and use the bathroom myself. I came back just to go deeper in it. Jay just kept speaking right to our thoughts and emotions, to our very souls. We laid down after a while, and it was still continuing, though not as rapidly and intense. The more I accepted his voice and focused on the moment, and didn't let fears keep me, the more free I felt. Through surrendering, I gained so much. We went back into the garage, and it still continued for some time, but Jay walked off to go make a phone call. He came back, and we spoke for some time, only for him to go off again. I believe it happened one more time, and then noticeably, within myself as well, Jay seemed to have been coming down. I remember him going off one last time, and then calling him, and that marked the movement when he responded again as Jay and not as God. He came and brought us a lighter that we used. We all went back out and laid down, and sat there in total silence with one another, just reflecting on the experience. A and I went and laid down inside, and Jay decided to remain back outside. A and I just relaxed on my bed and threw the Trevor Moore show on. I texted Jay sometime later, and after a while he responded. I went out to go meet him, and when I did, I addressed what happened between him, A, and myself for the first time. Solidifying and affirming for ourselves that Jay was indeed possessed by the Spirit of God, and spoke profoundly and deeply in levels and in ways I never even imagined with explicit specification. He began telling me from his perspective, and after a while of conversing, we went in to talk to A, to which he confirmed for us the same thing. A and I both had internal prayers and direct response physically manifested and directly speaking both to us. I still don't know how to fully describe this experience. It was as I say though. Jay experienced a metaphorical death. God came through him, and as a result, or he became aware of God in him, and led A and I into deeper acceptance of ourselves until he fully helped me accept my death and walk me through it. It was as if he was a Christ-like figure that died for us to greet us in death and show us the eternity of life in it. I've never felt such a deep connection to anything ever, or experienced communication within myself on a bodily and mental level. Everything seemed to have perfectly synchronized. And here's the second report. I stayed in Atlanta Sunday night with a friend and did not get much sleep, and then rode to my house Monday morning, November. Around 8:30 Bailey hit me up proposing to dose, and we ended up eating some Teacher's Gaze around 9:04, and around 30 minutes later I began experiencing an overwhelming nauseating come-up. After finding comfort between moments of nausea, I laid underneath Graham's car in the sun, with all but my face exposed to the rays, with Bailey sitting with his back to my car in the driveway. I felt as though a presence were with me, as though within inside myself. I said out loud to Bailey that I felt there was an entity or a presence. I then was within myself, and with what felt to be loving and familiar beings who were telling me, just be the sky. We're gonna put you up there. Just let go. Just be the sky. I felt like I was dreaming, but also more awake than ever. When I remember this setting, I remember us all as the house we were at, as the backyard we were in, and as each other. I felt like a child at a loving gathering, with beings tossing me up as you would a small child. I felt and could see them uplifting me as to reach the sky and let me become it. I then experienced an eerily familiar sensation, though it was also euphoric and peaceful. It was a lot like going to sleep, but I became one with all things, and I felt such connection, and I honestly don't know what else to say. I was just being the sky. It was more than anything I've known. The release of mind, body and soul. I then became aware of myself within myself. and as well there was within me what I acknowledged as a pet-like creature to the entities uplifting me to the heavens, but I mean it was animal-like, but I also recognised it as a demon with an opposite angel mirroring the actions. So maybe saying it was a pet wasn't too accurate, but it seemed to be a beast-like creature of duality that was crawling and cascading throughout skeletal structures within the heart of my being. They were like alien spider, scorpion, demon, angel-looking beings, crawling through skeletal structures that resembled a spine structure that was cascading and hung in space, with luminous colourful tones in the background, and it seemed the sun was still shining on us in the internal experience. I felt so clean and so pure after the visionary experience, but the just be the sky part was so much love, and when I let go, and died, and became one with everything, I just don't yet know how to describe what I felt. I could maybe hug you while channeling those energies so you could feel them, lol. It was all so beautiful. The resolution and clarity of divine detail that we see within ourselves is what it's all about. The human imagination is what has been shaping our awareness of self and reality, as well as shaping our experiences. The infinite beauty within the temple of man is healing to every degree if we are open and accept it. The demon was in my focus more than the angel, but like I said, they were one, and moved in unison, crawling throughout bone-like structures deep within the heart of my being. I'm still digesting this experience, as well as I had another visionary experience later in the day, when we opened ourselves to cannabis' spirit and hit some dabs. When I looked in the eye of the demon, it had a playful energy and character, but was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. As well, when our eyes met one another, the demon cocked its head as if analysing me with uncertainty but welcoming demeanour. The eye of the demon emanated this warm, reddish, orange light, forming prisms and geometric shapes rather than a pupil as our physical bodies have. I honestly wouldn't say I felt scared for any of it. Slightly cautious, though not weary. I've been praying for an experience like this, a visitation with messengers of love, and I was eager to surrender. I could feel and hear the angel and demonic creatures crawling in snake-like cascading patterns throughout my being. The noises were crazy. Also, when the just be the sky part was happening, I literally heard the entity speaking to me. I've been in communication with the universe in and out of psychedelic states, and it's always been a silent communication rooted in feeling rather than audible words. This experience, I literally heard them speaking to what reached me as English. I don't think darkness is objectively anything. The demon and angel I met yesterday are truly messengers of love and cleanse me. After the experience, when I got up and walked outside, the wind and the sun and everything I felt around me felt as though I was feeling it without any barrier between myself and what is. Everything felt so clean and so pure. To me, these experiences are what we as humanity have been drawing from in shaping our relationship with ourselves and the universe or God, as well as our awareness of the self and what it is. I feel so connected and a part of creation and life through opening myself to these kinds of experiences in trusting God. I'm so grateful to be here and have people like you who I can share this with and receive love and encouragement from. I want to write a book that's basically just going to be the Book of Hunter, as if a spiritual text kind of account describing being in this modern age. I cannot believe how blatant this stuff is in our everyday life and how disconnected we've become within ourselves to what's around us and within us. I feel like I've been reborn into a new way of being.
This won't be a long report, because it seems as if my mind has blocked out most of the experience. It was a Saturday night, a full moon and a supermoon, when the moon and the earth are closest together once every 18 years. Me and my girlfriend had been out drinking with her friends and had drank quite a lot. We eventually headed home around the 2 AM mark. When we did get home, we grabbed another bottle of wine from the fridge, sat out in the backyard and rolled a spliff and just sat around smoking and drinking. I'd recently received some changa from a friend, which he told me was particularly special, saying that there was something extra unique about this particular DMT and changa mix. I'd been hankering to try it for a bit, but the right opportunity hadn't come up. Normally I don't mix alcohol and psychedelics, but with the full moon and general good moods, I thought it was a good idea to give it a try. And wow, the first pipe, my partner and I had one together. She said she didn't have a very good experience. She prefers more ritualistic and natural settings for trips, as do I, but she doesn't take other settings as well as I do. It wasn't a breakthrough experience per se, but the fractal visuals were amazing and throughout everything. The main thing I remember from the first pipe though was the sense of purpose. Here I'll digress a moment. I've been pondering on the nature of DMT in the world. What's it for? What's its purpose? I almost feel as if sometimes when smoking it, it takes over my entire thought processes in my mind, replacing the regular chemicals of DMT and its desires and purpose. I'd stood up and started walking, exploring the world around me. After it started wearing down, I wanted another pipe. I smoked again. Same thing with the visuals and vague purpose. I decided one more. It seems that third time's the charm. That third inhalation was the last thing I remember. The next part I can't describe very well, but I will try my best. I remember these intense visuals, barely being able to properly see, and God knows how long this went on for, but I believe the trip lasted a lot longer than usual, perhaps over half an hour. I tried to think, but I wasn't capable of any thought whatsoever. No thought of my own anyway. I realised that I had destroyed my mind. It was gone. Me was gone. Ego was gone. I felt as if I were in an infinite tessellation of colours, dimensions and things, all one pulsating, transforming, interdimensional something or other. The sense of dread I cannot explain, for it wasn't feared dread, just acceptance dread. I had left this world entirely. I would never return. It should have made me sad, but it didn't. I felt incredible. I didn't feel. I couldn't. There was no I to do so. I don't remember getting up from outside, but suddenly I was inside, in the middle of the most intense sex with my partner. We'd torn each other's clothes off, and she was half on the bed, half off, screaming in ecstasy. I felt one with her. I felt as if this was it. We'd be doing this forever, which is not such a bad thing, I guess. Infinite sexual ecstasy and reproduction and transformation was what I felt. This went on for quite some time, and for the entire come down from the DMT as well. I feel a majority of what happened in the experience was blocked out by my mind, with only inklings of what I experienced seeping through to me. It was heaven and hell. It was infinity. It was the universe, the fabric of me, the fabric of everything. It was the inescapable and eternal. I don't know how the alcohol affected the experience, whether it helped or hindered. It certainly wasn't a bad or dangerous trip, but perhaps I'd have remembered more if I was sober. Before I start my report, I'd like to say one thing. There's nothing that can prepare one for a strong DMT experience. I've taken countless trips and mushroom doses and all other manner of substances as well. I'd read many reports and done all the safety data work. But it is by far the most vivid and earth-shattering experience known to man. It compromised everything I've known about reality and left me with endless questions. It is not to be taken lightly. I tried lower doses of DMT several times before. Most of the experiences were simply terrifying and amazing in their grandeur. Visions of hexagons and rectangles, but nothing that had any real meaning. Just beautiful shapes and colours in a beautiful realm. I'd been talking to other people about how to better understand this chaos that my mind was being thrust into, and had come up with a plan. The plan that was recommended to me is intent. Rather than just smoking it and seeing what happens, I'd instead go in there with a purpose. My simple purpose this time was show me. Nothing more or less, just show me. Because of the nature of the DMT experience, I cannot tell you in T+ terms when these things happened, only that the total duration was about 25 minutes. On Saturday morning at about 10, I loaded my bong with about 130 milligrams of changa, which contained 50% DMT and other MAOIs, Capi, Syrian rue, and herbs designed to lengthen and heighten the experience. I lay back in my darkened bedroom and slowly smoked the infused herb, taking it deeper and deeper in one huge long hit until I cleared the screen. The now familiar carrier wave, the sound I hear when DMT is about to affect me, started winding higher and higher. I only just managed to put the bong down and lay down before my vision exploded inwards. I said, "Show me," inside my mind. I almost yelled it. Fractal hands reached out of the explosion and pulled me into the void. Everything was twisting with inexplicable shapes and colours. I felt stress. I realised I'd forgotten to breathe and let the smoke out of my lungs. The only part of me that existed right at that moment was my lungs, tongue and teeth. I could taste the strange herb in my mouth, and then I couldn't even feel that. I was in space. In the space with me were insane machines of unknown purpose, flying off to one side, refocusing and then moving to the other side. My perception started being shifted to the left and then replicated on the right side of my field of vision. It was like one of the old TVs with the vertical hold sitting out, except my horizontal hold was out and needed adjusting. Suddenly, I was shooting down the static line that was separating the parts of my vision. I was then thrust into another void with twisting shapes. I couldn't think or feel anything. I saw a seed sprout a shoot, and that shoot bloom into a growing fetus, being fed by the seed. As the fetus grew, it was encapsulated in a skin that became round and formed a planet. I came down to the planet at hyperspace speeds, almost instantaneously. As I stood on the edge of a forest looking down on a small valley, a man rose from the earth with his arms wide out. Energy was flowing upwards through the man as he rose out of the earth. The planet was channeling energy through him, and it was spraying out of the top of his head in a cosmic radiance. Then suddenly, I was being pulled in by the energy towards him. Except I didn't go up through him like the rest of the energy, but straight into his head. Then my vision whited out, and I was back in the void again with the twisting shapes. It seemed I was that man for a fleeting moment, but then I was nothing again. The textures and colours were indescribable, not to mention the angelic beauty of the whole vision. Everything about it was magical and pulsating. I didn't think about death or dying. I didn't even seem to exist anymore. I had never existed before, and it seemed that these were the moments of my creation, and elevation sped up incredibly quick. Then suddenly, all colours faded to grey, and I could feel my body again. I opened my eyes and could see my room. Suddenly I remembered to breathe again. I lay there for 5 or 10 minutes, just trying to get a grip of what I had seen. But my vision was still all trippy, and I was feeling quite out of sorts. Oh my, that's all I could think. I got up and looked at the clock in the hallway, and about 25 minutes had passed. I've had some time to better understand what I saw, and I'm better able to describe it now as this experience was about 2 months ago. I also had quite a bit of reintegration issues through the weekend and into Monday too. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen and ended up having to draw and write it out to the best of my ability. Even after that, it still took me another 12 hours and a long sleep to come right and be able to function properly again, rather than walking around in a preoccupied daze. It really was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. I have a better understanding now of what happened. Certainly a lot more respect for the substance as well. I won't be taking it so quickly or lightly again after having such a strong experience. I'm still on the fence whether I was being shown intrinsic truths about the universe, or if it was all just a self-generated hallucination. I guess it doesn't really matter though, in terms of perception. I went into the woods by the creek shortly before sunset with a music player and a joint of low-strength basil changa, NN-DMT, harmless alkaloids, basil and cannabis. The changa hit very smoothly, with none of the usual unpleasant DMT taste or harshness. I came up after about 20 minutes of smoking and had beautiful visuals all around me. I particularly remember a knot in a tree that looked like some kind of pink nether portal. I'd like to make a painting of this at some point. I also remember a yellow and green rock with 2 cracks in it. I remember thinking how cool it would be if it was a meteorite or something. I went walking along the creek, and about 5 minutes in I saw a deer standing in the creek. This delighted me, and I thought I was going to have a spiritual nature moment like in Pocahontas. I thought the deer would be more calm if I didn't try to sneak up on her, but once I got within 20 feet she scrambled up the bank and ran away. Oh well, it's still cool. About 10 minutes in I felt the presence of my friend Ahum, a 5-dimensional alien I met on previous trips. I couldn't quite see him, but I would catch glimpses of him in my peripheral vision, touching my shoulder with his hand to guide me through the forest. Ahum led me to an intersection of the creek with other creeks, where there was lots of human graffiti and a train bridge. Some of the graffiti looked like an alien language, and I could almost hear the sounds of it in my head, and read one piece out loud as Shipkrai, a consonant cluster I had no idea I could even pronounce. I saw that across the tracks from where Ahum led me was a big patch of tall, healthy cannabis plants. They're not flowering yet, but it was a really cool thing to see anyways. I doubt they have much THC in them, but they did have a mild marijuana odour. So Ahum basically led me to an unlimited supply of CBD flower. Score. I experienced glossolalia during this trip. I sang a song in Daksasnai, a new con language inspired my experience with DMT. I barely understood any of the song, but it sounded cool. I also practiced the words that I'd already learned, and learned some new words as well. Tleoklat, meaning river. Huawe, meaning what or wow. Atenhoi meant this and that, and Karai, meaning grass. Around this time I got to the cannabis patch I was coming down. Come down was very smooth with a nice but mild afterglow. I noticed that the sunset was simply gorgeous, but I felt disappointed that I hadn't brought more changa with me. The last quarter or so of my joint was cannabis, not changa, which I had hoped would enhance and lengthen the trip. It did, but not more than a couple minutes. All things said, this was a magical trip and definitely my best DMT trip so far. I might even go so far as to say it was among my best trips ever. I mixed my changa at a 1:3 ratio of DMT and harmala alkaloids to leaf, making for a trip that was very mild by DMT standards, but just right for me. I didn't get any of the panic, throat tightening or head about to explode feeling that I get when I smoke straight DMT. It was a much smoother and longer ride, lasting about 30 minutes. It was more like being on mushrooms for half an hour than freebase DMT, to be honest. I regularly use entheogens and smoke cannabis every couple of days. I plan on doing this again tonight, only this time I'll bring more changa. My most vivid and authentic encounter with DMT entities. I had less than half a gram of some changa and was sitting on it for months, waiting for the perfect time to take my changa virginity. The main reason why I waited so long was associated with the pre-flight anxiety of travelling so far inside of my mind, or to somewhere else that couldn't even exist according to the rules of our dimension, and of our experiences that dominated the entirety of our plane existence. It had me in its grips. The perfect time came though, and I knew I had to try changa on that marvellous summer day. I went to the liquor store and bought a pipe for this special occasion that would only occur once in this lifetime. The pipe was small, blue, and had a mushroom head covered in white dots. It looked like a blue mushroom or a tiny penis with a severe STD. I returned home and weighed out my dose. 137 milligrams of changa poured out of the bag onto the Gemini scale, and I decided I would try to inhale all of that. The changa itself wasn't the 1:1 ratio, but only contained 30% DMT. This did concern me, as did my smoking method, as I didn't have a bong at the time, but I just had to inhale the medicinal changa fumes. I poured the 137 milligrams into the blue, STD-stricken penis, and laid down in my bed all by myself, while trying to retire the all-encompassing anxiety that DMT bestows upon the curious psychonauts that dare to vape it. I let the lighter lick the top of the green magical herbs, and I slowly inhale. The anxiety is gone. I now know that there is nowhere to hide, and as being an extremely avid explorer of my own consciousness, I have to take the 3 hits. 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits. The combustion from the smoke that hits my lungs feels so familiar and exquisite. I cannot believe how easy this is as my vision of reality begins to fade and break down into acute fractals that are crunching everything in my eyesight into eventual darkness, until bam, I'm gone. The ether that my soul is acquainted with engulfs my vantage point, as I take in a spectacular manifestation that we all experience once we dissolve from our simple reality. I can feel myself breathing at a swift pace as my mind, soul, or both get pushed to their mortal limit. Exquisite trigonometric fractals that resemble DNA strands are the main centerpiece of this white and silver room, that looks quite how heaven is portrayed as being. I get the eerie feeling that I know this place, that I've been here before, similar to when I trip on psilocybin mushrooms, or vaporize white or yellow DMT. But before I can take it all in, it disappears. What happens next is my most vivid and authentic encounter with DMT entities I've ever had. I see a dark-skinned creature with the mouth of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. In fact, after watching the Cheshire Cat scene from the 67-year-old film, this beady-eyed character had the exact grin and mannerisms. I could sense multiple spider-like eyes floating around the entity's head, as he seemed to be wearing a trench coat. Then he showed me something. In between us blossomed 2 humans, these 2 beautiful girls. They were approximately in their 20s. These humanoid beings defined perfection and attractiveness. Silky blonde hair, ocean blue eyes, and glowing white skin. The 2 females bore resemblance to Nordic goddesses. At first the faces were connected and they were one. But not very long after this did they develop in more complexity and started making out. I'm in complete shock as I'm witnessing the most detailed and gorgeous scene from any of my countless DMT experiences. This was nothing pornographic, as the large breasts were kept inside the blouses and I never did catch a glimpse of either of the butts. Just love and grace washed over me, as this entertaining encounter continued. The Cheshire Cat entity was still enjoying being the provider of this absolutely stunning spectacle, as I wallowed within a dimension of euphoria and peace. Before anything else could occur, I opened my eyes and had returned to my bedroom. I closed them, trying to travel back, but alas, only small fractals blinked as I was forced back into this world full of hardship and suffering. I stayed in one place for 10 minutes with my eyes never wider and mouth gaped open in shock and disbelief of what I had just experienced. A rainbow film covered everything in my room, and the psychedelic visuals were strong in effect. My hand looked alien, as it always does after a journey to the DMT realm. After less than 20 minutes, the visuals vanished, but the emotions did not. I couldn't believe what had just occurred. Did I actually encounter an entity from some other plane of existence who knew I'd be entertained with a display of sexual love from the opposite sex of a member of my species? Or was it just a separate intelligence deep within my subconscious engaging in a sexual activity, since I'm horny as fuck all the time? TLDR, smoked some changa and a dark-skinned creature showed me lesbians making out. Changa is the best. All it took was one deep toke. Within seconds, a shiver goes through my body, and I break into another reality. It definitely feels like going through a door or a membrane of sorts. The golden flow of intricate arabesques is starting to fill my whole field of vision. And seconds later, I'm bending with time and space, together with multidimensional tapestries. My body now is curved and I sway along these curves as if dancing. Golden, red and green stained glass cobwebs appear. They twist and bend, never straight, always rounded, ever shifting, receding into eternity, paradoxical, topological labyrinths Escher could only dream about. What is this place? It feels so familiar, like I've just been here, then went on playing a human character in some other dimension. Is this my real home? Why does it feel so familiar? We've got you now. I'm being greeted by multiple invisible entities. I can feel their presence and I can hear them chattering. Are they simply my thoughts, or are they actual beings from another dimension? I guess it doesn't matter at this point, because all of my normal thinking facilities don't operate well in this space, Here I'm just a point of awareness, floating and flying through multi-dimensional tapestries, castles, cathedrals, and ceilings crafted by celestial masters. But why am I seeing this architecture? Is this what my brain looks like from within? There's this electronic buzzing sound penetrating my reality. Everything is crisp, crackling, electrical, and loaded with energy. I want to grab onto normal reality. I open my eyes, but nothing makes sense anymore. There's only patterns and elements that constitute reality. But they become one flow of imagery, one great soup of elements. I know that I am in the forest, but golden cobwebs invaded everything, and there's nothing to grab onto. Time is fractal, and nothing is straight anymore. Vaguely, I am seeing smoke coming out of my mouth still. Holy smokes, has it only been seconds of real time? I can swear it's been at least an hour or even longer. I close my eyes and recline onto a tree. My heart is racing, but it's not uncomfortable, and I don't feel any panic, even though I did used to suffer from panic attacks in the past. There's the infinite architecture again. An entity sitting on each block of the receding iridescent tapestry. They laugh, they taunt, they make fun, but most of all, they care about me. "We got you now," they shout once again. I am not sure whether they mean that I am safe or that I am completely under their mischievous control. It's probably both, but I have no fear, only curiosity. I dig their humour. With my eyes closed, I see only endless labyrinths, an entity sitting on top of golden pyramids trying to touch me, calm me, and play. And this smell of DMT is penetrating my whole being. I'll never forget this smell. I can feel myself slowly returning to my home planet. Jesus fucking Christ, I proclaim, holding my face in my palms. Sparkling, magical, ineffable reality is receding fast, leaving me with indescribable feelings of joy and euphoria. Wonderful, wonderful, I babble like a fool. It was a time machine. I went back to my previous life, when I wasn't wearing this human suit. Otherwise, how can I explain the overwhelming deja vu feeling of being back? DMT doesn't work with your imagination, your personal issues, and your expectations. It's way, way beyond all of that. It's not concerned about your personal load. In DMT world, you can't grab onto your old self. I mean, you can try, but it's pointless. You bought a ticket to an interdimensional ride, so you better sit down and look, and enjoy if you're able to. The sunshine is penetrating me now, giving warmth and energy. The euphoria is unreal. I'm back, but still feel like I'm tripping on a lot of acid. But I'm not inside the castle of eternal entities anymore. Life is great and mysterious. This is healing. This gives me hope that no matter how hard our lives are, there is something beyond it. Was it only inside my head? Maybe, who knows? Does it matter though? Who can even tell? All in all, this experience was amazing. It lasted around 10 minutes in total, but it felt much, much longer. The only physical effect I could feel was an increased heart rate and sweating. But I was sitting in the hot sun, so I guess that may explain it. Respect DMT. It is truly incredible.
Simply Being, No Experience. Uploaded to Earwood by Matty on September 26, 2003. I don't really know how to describe my experience. For one thing, describing any psychedelic experience is difficult, especially to naive people. And on the other hand, to have an experience, there must be a self present to have it. Paradoxically, the whole thing is rather simple. In college, a good friend of mine was deeply interested in psychedelics. When I met him, I knew virtually nothing about the drugs. I'd never tried them, and would never even think about using them. I was naive, and like so many people, the idea of using drugs was reproachable. It just so happened that during the week of spring break, I came home, and his order of DPT had come in that very day. I walked over to his apartment that evening, not thinking that I would ever try DPT that very night, but knowing that it was a possibility. His apartment was a studio, meaning very small, but well lit with soft lights and a cosy atmosphere. We discussed DPT, and I read up about it in his decent collection of books. It was my decision to make, and I wanted to make an informed one. Anyway, to cut to the point, after almost 3 hours of indecision and debate within myself, I bent down, took the rolled paper, and did my first line ever. Now, you have to remember that at that point in time I'd never even tried marijuana, so doing DPT was a major step and risk for me. He had taken his 100 milligrams about an hour before me, and he was puking in the bathroom not long after. I was happy that I had very little in my stomach. I wiped my nose, settled down on the floor, and waited for the effects to transpire. The first thing I noticed was a change in light. No, actually, it wasn't quite a change in light, but rather I was merely noticing the pattern of light thrown on the wall. This was about 10 minutes after insufflation, and then things started happening very fast. I looked up, and the rectangular pattern carved in the door started popping in and out, which startled me. The field at the sides of my vision became blurry. My whole vision itself started to move and pulsate and do all kinds of things I had only read about. I wasn't vomiting and had no other adverse effects, but quite frankly I was freaked out. I sat there against the wall, wanting everything to stop, when suddenly I got stuck in time. I thought to myself, this is never going to stop. And if that wasn't bad enough, I continued my errors. If it's never going to end, did it ever begin? I stood up, tried to calm down, and went to drink some water. So at this point I could still function properly and take care of myself. That was a good sign. Where to go from here, I thought, and the obvious answer was to lay down and relax. After laying on the floor, things in my memory became unclear as to what happened next. What is clear to me is that there was a complete annihilation of any remnants of a me, an I with a name and a past, and fears and worries and regrets, and hopes and dreams. Let me also make it clear that this happened swiftly and without struggle. In one moment that I was cleared out and swept away, with no shred of self left. There was no fear of dying or losing oneself, because in order for there to be fear, there must be that me or I. Therefore, how do I call this an experience? I was no more. Dead, gone, out to lunch, and I was replaced with, and this is the thing that is not very clear at all and impossible to describe, pure energy. There was simply energy and nothing more. I circumnavigated the earth countless times. Well, in fact, I was the world, and it was me. After peaking, about an hour and a half after insufflation, I do remember sort of popping up into my body to make sure that it was not in trouble. I wear hard contact lenses, and I'm always concerned about losing them, so I never really lost contact with my body or awareness of my body's needs during the whole time. I was not unconscious. Slowly, perceptibly, I floated back down, passed through a nice period of warm bliss, and then came back into my normal baseline state of being. And as I did, I watched my old ways and mental habits fall back into place, as I knew and expected they would. I was truly reborn into the world, and for a while at least, the environment around me was new, fascinating, almost surreal. From beginning to end, about 3 to 4 hours had passed. The next day, I doubted whether or not what happened was real, or whether or not it was a true glimpse into reality. My doubts were shattered when 2 weeks later I had the same experience, although I didn't panic in the beginning. The second trip was nearly identical, except for the beginning and end. I ended the second DPT experience with an excursion to a club, but that's a story for another time. What were the after effects? Before trying DPT, I sort of had a notion that I would somehow feel dirty afterwards. I can tell you now that I have never felt cleaner in my entire life. 1,000 baths couldn't have made me feel cleaner. For the next week, I was able to appreciate the birds and the trees and the bright blue sky on a higher scale than I ever knew. That experience still affects me to this day, and not many days go by that I don't think about it. I've told few people about this, and very few of them would understand. What do I think of it all now? A door was opened, a door was closed. I know that it will be opened again. Breakfast of the Gods, uploaded to Irwin by Dr. Wiley on September 21st, 2011. It came about on a bright May morning that I decided to take another psychedelic attempt at my new fascination at the time, DPT. I woke at about 10 AM, and I realised the day was upon me that I must deepen my psyche, and I had acquired this strange powder from a friend a few weeks ago. I've been dying to give it another try. Previously, my buddy and I had done DPT, and the dose I took was way too strong. The hallucinations were overwhelming, both with eyes open and closed. The latter were much more elaborate and unfolding, and were easier to integrate into my mind. Words always fail to accurately describe vivid hallucinations, because as always, one must experience the madness firsthand to truly know. I will try to articulate my mind's eye. With eyes open, sitting in a chair in my living room, where these two walls meet with the ceiling, there ceased to be an external meeting of right angles. However, they protruded outwards into my visual field. The corners of the room were coming straight for me, and I couldn't escape. No amount of marijuana or music could soothe this madness I was going through. No sleep for the wicked. With eyes closed, I sat back in my chair and felt as though I was in the clouds, floating in a purely meditative state. Visuals of figures mimicking myself floated past me on mountaintops. I felt as if I was doing front and back flips simultaneously, which was such a strange paradoxical feeling. There was pure beauty everywhere. Straight up Alex Gray shit. After hours of mental pleasure/torture, I was gradually allowed to regain my consciousness by some divine force, for I was not in control of myself at the time. Now, on to today's experience. I woke early around 10 AM and ripped a huge line of DPT, roughly 100 to 150 milligrams. I jumped into the shower with the hopes that by the time it was done, I would be tripping face. Toward the end of the shower, I started getting tremors in my limbs, and I knew it was been for something very infinitely interesting. I quickly got out of the shower and got dressed, and started blasting mellow STS9 out of my amp, and laid down for the effects to override my mind. Within minutes, my closed-eye visuals were changing with every note and transition of the song. It was amazing. I strongly recommend closing the eyes and taking in music while on DPT. All my thoughts flowed with the music. Everything in my mind, everything from this day back to my childhood, raced through my mind. Everyone I'd ever met, had fun with, screwed over, laughed with, cried with, and especially cried over, were flowing through my mind like an endless stream. However, this stream was made entirely of grains of sand, each grain being an aspect of my life which had affected others in positive, negative, and neutral ways. Very spiritual, very overwhelming, very necessary. I'd recently been in a serious car crash in which I went through the windshield, and this was like a beacon in my mind for a perfect second chance at life. I cherished every minute of life, and I would, as the DPT showed me, cherish every single day, every moment, every interaction, every action and reaction. A perfect paradoxical mindfuck. Life is great, and there is no need to be afraid to do anything you set your mind to, as you are the only one who can create that action through your potential cooped up inside you. Just gotta let it out. No need to hide the funk. Let it flow. After about 3 hours of intrinsic thought, I gradually went outside and went for a walk. The day was sunny and warm. The trees, plants, birds, and people, they all seemed to vibrate with this vivid energy. It's so hard to explain though, I wish you were there. On the walk, I saw an old dog and I stopped to pet him. He seemed to talk to me in a silent tone, and I understood his life story. Nice fellow. I gradually made my way to Wawa and got a necessary drink since the drip was chemically nasty as fuck. Walked around admiring the rest of the street for about an hour, and then eventually went back to my apartment to mellow out, possibly write this report. At the moment I am baseline, and writing all of this still seems like it didn't capture the essence of my entire experience. However, I implore you to try a hefty dose of DPT for yourself, and try to articulate what just happened to you. It's virtually impossible. All in all, this dose was perfect for me, because it was purely intrinsic and thought-provoking, which was exactly what I was looking for. Earlier when I was faced, I texted my friend, DPT for breakfast, and he just responded with, "Breakfast of the gods." I hope to dine with the gods soon enough, but until then, live your life. Coming Apart Perfectly, uploaded to Irrwood by Luke on January 5th, 2004. Whoa. Today has been the most incredible day I've ever experienced, or at least one of them. DPT has got to be the most amazing drug that I've ever experienced, and is something to be worshipped. My fear and humble respect are given to this drug, and the doors that it opens into myself. The awesome power that this drug has shown me is incredible. I've seen visuals unlike any I've ever seen before, and I tripped unlike I've ever had before. Began after 60mg insufflated, extremely intense, into thinking about being attacked by Egyptian giants, provoked by thinking about the Discovery Channel, and then thinking about what awesome alien gods that the Egyptians must have worshipped to build such great scary structures of giant cats. Very weird trip to think about. Eventually, I sat on my bed and was able to somewhat gather myself, noticing that it seemed like I was sunken into my bed, to the point that I was actually part of it. This is when the best part of the trip began. This most awesome sense of respect and understanding occurred within me. I began to discover my own potential, because I've never been able to see myself just as I see myself like this. The state I was in was superhuman, and I could have been levitating off of my bed, and I wouldn't have been surprised in the least. It felt like molecules were separating, and I was one with everything. Then I observed my dresser, and patterns of eyeballs inside of it. These were visuals beyond anything I've ever seen. I was connected to the universe, unlike in any way that I've ever known, and it felt like I was communicating physically with dead spirits, and this led me to concluding that I was face to face with death itself. I felt a hollowness around me that scared the living shit out of me. These faces of torment began to appear in front of me, and this was a learning experience that actually made me feel inner pain for the awesome nature of death itself and to the dying process. I felt a coldness that I tried to wrap my arms around, that made my insides feel like an abyss, just empty death. This gave me a greater understanding of what death is, because this is actually the closest I've ever come to knowing it with myself. After I forgot what I was trying to understand, I came out of a deep thought by forgetting what I was thinking about. This is when I just enjoyed this awesome and fearful state with a foothold, and I was able to navigate it much better. I began to find very great meaning in everything that I've neglected to give deserved meaning to, most importantly, my own death. I don't want to die, and the reality that I've seen makes this acknowledgement very scary. The power that I've experienced, the only way that I can describe it is as being religious and extremely emotional. I was able to see into the details of perfection and understanding. It's like the smashing power of 5-MeO-DMT, but prolonged into an amazing trip that is possible enough to navigate, with the most incredible visuals I've ever seen. I haven't yet tried DMT, but now it is at the top of my interest. 5-MeO has basically scared the shit out of me too much to want to go back to it that often, but this DPT has become my favourite drug I've ever had. I will know this drug as much as possible. Sacred and Important, uploaded to Irrwood by Willy Will on July 10th, 2013. I've had a vial of DPT for about 3 months now, and I've used it 4 times. This specific instance describes my 5th experience. 2 friends and I were on Cubensis and having a good time, and since they never had an experience with DPT, I wanted to show them. They'd both done DMT, but I didn't tell them what to expect with DPT. Little did I know that this would be my most intense experience with it so far. I cleared everything out of my room, turned on my ambient light, and played my spiritual DPT playlist. I laid out a 25mg, 40mg and 50mg line. 50mg was for me. They laid on my bed and I was flat on the floor. After 10 minutes, I laid another 10 milligrams and railed it, and laid back down and closed my eyes. My spirit began to lose all sense of arrogance and ignorance. My character was non-existent. I became the student. Mushroom visuals moved aside as the DPT teacher took the stage. I opened my eyes to the ceiling, where clear tentacle-like arms surrounded by light were reaching out for me, showing me that it was there. I closed my eyes again. The teacher takes full control by now, 30 minutes in, and the lesson has begun. We begin to telepathically communicate in tongue, mostly me asking who it was, but he just began without answering. First, he pulls my mind to the very beginning of my memories, shows me a slideshow of crystal clear images of key points in my life as if I was experiencing them again. The slideshow lasted for about 5 minutes. Second, the teacher decides to show me how my brain and body works. He brings me to the part of my brain that controls my heart function and says, "Watch this." I feel my heart beat twice irregularly and then return to normal. Without letting me think about the fact that I could have just died, he takes me to the part that controls my lungs. It begins to become impossible to breathe. Then, he lets it go back to normal. Third, he says, "Now watch this," and pulls my spirit out of my body and takes us galaxies away. He points me to the entire scope of time, selects 5,000 years out of it, and stretches it out like an accordion to show me what it looks like. Impossible to comprehend, of course. And then he squeezes it back to its spot in the infinite timeline. Then, he takes me back to our current place in time, and puts me back in my body for one last lesson. The teacher pulls a strand of DNA from my brain and brings it close to me so I can see the details. It is scrolling to the right as he explains that this is who I am and where I come from. I say okay, and then he goes on to split the strand apart, remove several nucleotides, and rearrange them and place them back, zipping the strand back together. I am now a different human being than I was. He sees that I am scared, so he unzips the strand again and puts the nucleotides back so my genetic structure is the same as before. This is what I can do. This is the power I have. Everything starts to fade, and then I just sat there for about an hour discussing the experiences we each had. I came to conclude with an explanation of the difference between DMT and DPT. DMT tells you, while DPT shows you. I don't know what they are exactly trying to teach, but I do learn every time. I definitely recommend DPT for someone who is experienced and is willing to surrender control. I've always been interested in psychedelic drugs. Ever since I first tried acid a long time ago when I was younger, I knew that psychedelics offer more than just a stimulating sense of well-being. They offer a greater insight into one's mind and that of other people. However, it's been hard to find acid, so I've resorted to a few other things here and there, such as weed, alcohol, complete brain crap now that I've done mescaline. This wasn't the first time I've tried mescaline either. The first time, I ate one San Pedro and had a decent experience. Since the cactus was easily available, I've tried a few other times to get a good trip. I bought some Peruvian torch cacti, thinking they were somehow stronger than San Pedro's, but they're not. It's just a misconception. So after a not so special experience on a 12-inch cactus and a half of a 12, I decided to buy some 12-inch San Pedro. Today, before work, I drank 2 12-inch San Pedros. Normally I wouldn't trip before work, but I didn't expect to trip that hard, because in the past, the Peruvians were mild. Unlike the Peruvians though, I started to feel a trip coming on within 30 minutes of the ingestion. I started to feel apprehensive about having to work because I felt this inner feeling that told me that I was going to trip hard. I stuck with it though and thought, screw it, I want to see what will happen if I trip at work. So I went anyway. What happened next is one of the greatest days of my life. I work in a restaurant, so social interaction is everywhere, and when the mescaline started to kick in, my whole entire way of communicating with people changed. Sure, I was seeing little hallucinations here and there, and little quirky visuals, but that was not what interested me. I was suddenly overcome by an extreme awareness of affection and appreciation for others. When I started a conversation with someone, instead of automatically thinking about myself and how to direct attention to myself, which is what many individuals do, I was able to empathise with others immediately and understand their emotional state. I was able to openly and fluently express my emotions and wanted to soothe other people who were feeling down. About an hour into the experience, I was starting to feel exactly what mescaline really was capable of, something I've never felt on it before. This chemical made me feel love, unselfish appreciation to things other than myself, and giving my unselfishness to others made me feel great, and my positive attitude brushed off on them. I started to feel ultimate maturity coming on. The realisation that making others feel good about their work and their job made them feel great, and me good too, rather than constantly whining and trying to feed my ego. After a while longer, time started to have less meaning. I was able to do my job pretty well. The mescaline didn't really affect my memory or job skills, but it definitely took the work off my mind. Time probably didn't have meaning, because I never felt like I had to get anywhere. I was already there. When I got home from work, I called my parents just to see how their day went, something I don't normally do, and I realised that I should do it more often, and felt deep love for them, which felt good. This was the most significant experience I've ever had from a drug. It taught me great respect for myself and, most importantly, other life. There are many other powerful effects too, which I'll not go into. It's almost as if mescaline takes one out of the survival mode one is accustomed to, and puts one in touch with a higher awareness. There is a sad side to the drug, however, an awareness of the many problems with society. That's why I had to write this report, because I want others to experience what I have. And I'm sure if they did, their lives may become better. This whole world would benefit from this drug, but mescaline is not something that one can do every day obliviously, because one still has to make sure he does the basic things to survive. I will surely be visiting this realm again though, because it is divine. I had heard of the plant from friends who had taken it. I found their experiences varied and rather bizarre, but it was before I tried it myself. Armando, who was out from Peru, agreed to provide us with a dried cactus and guide us through what he called the gates of San Pedro. We started about 9 AM one Saturday by ingesting the plant, one handful each, and then once the nausea had passed, or been embraced, we embarked on a blindfolded meditation, the rainbow light meditation, in which our guide took us through each chakra from root to crown. At each chakra, we visualised the corresponding colour, chanted a mantra, focused on the breath and movement which was unique to that chakra. The purpose of this was to facilitate opening, and at each stage I could feel the energy swirling up until we reached the crown chakra, at which stage my spirit or soul literally exploded out of the top of my head and soared up into space on what I believe was the universe. Silence, darkness, and complete love and compassion surrounded me. I was not a separate entity, but one with everything. I felt inseparable from the universe, as if I was in fact the whole universe itself, and I sensed an increased consciousness, an awareness that was total and unlimited, endless. I realised that everything me on this earth, had experienced up until this point in my life was not real. It's like being in the Matrix, the movie, and then having the plug pulled and suddenly have a new reality. It's the realisation that life as we know it is in fact a manifestation produced by our consciousness, or the universal consciousness. I believe now that we manifest ourselves on this and other planets to learn and grow spiritually. The Earth is one of the fastest planets that we can grow spiritually, and this is generally achieved by what we perceive as human suffering. When we become enlightened, that is, we move out of the victim archetype and into one where we embrace everything and believe that everything happens for a reason, and then we are able to manifest on Earth whatever we want. But I digress. Anyway, here I am in this matrix space, and in truth, just a little bit freaked out. So I start looking around in the blackness and start to see faint lights like distant hazy stars floating around, and I'm thinking, angels. And then start to wonder if there is a heaven and what it would look like, and in that instant, I heard a booming voice saying, "Welcome to Nirvana Lounge." And looking around, I see this bright and sunny pool-like setting, And there sits Armando, and one of the other guys in our group who was trained to be a shaman like him. I stayed here for a while, laughing and talking in the sunshine, and then later, when I was calmer, decided to go back. I start wondering how I'm going to get back to my body, and then instantly, I'm back in space, slowly feeling the tug and urge to return, and simultaneously feeling the fear of going back to an existence that's not real. I saw my life on Earth through a window, me sitting blindfolded on the floor, the group in the room, my life playing out before me, but without me. Did I want to go back? Could I stay? But what would happen to me here? I felt I had to return, but how? I started to get a bit panicky, and then I heard a voice in my head, Armando, saying breathe. And so I did, and next thing, I felt my body around me. The aches from sitting too long in one position, the sound of my breath, and all my senses prickled and felt alive. It was a truly awakening experience, one that we'll strive to attain without the aid of mescaline, which San Pedro is. It took some time to process the information I gained from my trip, but I am grateful for the knowledge and the experience. It all began on a Sunday in early June 2007. I awoke with a feeling that it would be a day that would change my outlook and that my life would never be quite the same again. This was to be my first experience of the drug known as mescaline. Although I kept the dosage relatively low, it must be said that I was not expecting such a powerful spiritual experience. I had read pretty much all that there is to read on the subject, but was still unsure about exactly how it would affect me. I ingested tea made from 8 inches of fresh cacti that was acidified with lemon juice, and within 90 minutes, experienced changes to my thought patterns and an overall increase in my well-being. I consumed several cups of lemon and ginger tea with honey throughout the experience, and suffered no nausea or stomach irritation. The feeling the cactus tea gave me for the first 3 hours was one of stimulation and joyfulness. At around the 3-hour mark, the stimulation gave birth to a profound blissful euphoria, with the world around me transformed into another place entirely. Everything looked familiar to me. It was akin to a childhood perception of the world that was brand new, being seen for the first time. I spent the day in nature full of empathy, simply admiring the beauty of creation and wondered how on earth we let ourselves destroy such perfection. At one point near the beginning of the trip, I was walking along a trail in a local park and had a very powerful healing experience. As the drug took greater and greater hold, I began to be filled with a great, overwhelming fear that filled every cell of my being. At one point, the fear was all-consuming, and I could do nothing to hold it back. It seemed to be a deep-seated feeling that I had held onto for a long time, and knew very well, and I was now staring it full in the face. The mescaline was presenting me with this feeling I owned, and not letting me go until I just sat down and accepted it. This experience lasted some 30 minutes or so, and although it was most unpleasant, has left me with a far greater understanding of how I am put together. I now feel as though I have grown as a person as a result of this experience. Some time was spent exploring woods and vast meadows. Some time was spent marvelling the detail of the roots and bark of trees. There was one moment, however, where I truly understood how Aldous Huxley must have felt when he saw that infamous rose. The meadow that I was in was full of wildflowers, unusual grasses, and life of all kinds, and I found my attention turned to a single yellow buttercup and was captivated by this single flower amongst so many others. A moment later, my awareness shifted so completely that all of physical reality was tuned out completely, and I was aware of nothing but myself and the buttercup in a glowing space of golden and white light. There was a sense of complete and total bliss, and at that moment I knew that I was truly one with the universe. There was no time there, no past, no future, just the buttercup and myself in this golden glow of eternity, the great being of ultimate reality. An amount of time passed whilst I was in this state, and I'm not sure how much. On coming back to physical reality, I was aware of a complete piece of living and existing, that just writing about it brings a tear to my eye. I looked around that meadow again and understood the purpose of life, and that we must express this oneness in all that we do, for it is this that brings us true happiness. It was about 4.5 hours now since ingestion, and the mescaline was very much in full effect. The world around me looked the way it did when I was a child. Houses looked like the gingerbread cottage in the book Hansel and Gretel. I decided that I should head back towards my house, as I was somewhat overwhelmed and felt a tad vulnerable in my state of mind. I got lost a couple of times in the nature reserve that I was in, and had to ask a couple of times for directions. Talking to people was quite tense, as I struggled not to be too distracted when talking to them. I did my best to act normal, and managed to pull it off quite well. Although, some way across the middle of a trail that I was on, I saw two joggers coming towards me, a man and a woman. The trail was about 12 feet wide, and there was plenty of space for us all to pass quite comfortably. However, I had stopped and stood to the right of the trail so that they could pass without any obstruction at all, and the woman kept jogging straight for me. On her approach, I moved my body sideways as she made no effort to change her course. She passed me, brushing my clothes with hers as she went, and said, "Good afternoon." It gave me a very strange, self-satisfied look. When past me, I glanced over my shoulder to see her smirk at the man that was jogging with her. He returned her smirk as they carried on their way. After this experience, I was sure that she knew that I was tripping, and I was trying to fuck with my mind and play games. I spent the next couple of moments thinking about the situation, before concluding that I needed to be more careful around people that I do not know, as letting them know that I am in a state of psychedelic intoxication leaves me in a place of great vulnerability. After getting lost a few more times, I finally found the road back to my house and followed the road back, seeing enormous detail in everything that I passed. Everything felt friendly and vibrant, and fortunately, my road was quiet for the time of day, and I joyfully walked the 15 minutes it took back to my humble house without a care in my mind. On opening the front door to my house, I saw the inside of my house like it was lit up in neon lights, a tad freaky. Everything was so alive and detailed as it was still daylight outside. For many hours I lay on my bed with my eyes closed, being shown the power of the infinite creative energy of God, and how this energy is expressed sexually. This energy ran from the crown of my head, down my body and out through my base chakra. The mescaline was so typically a phenethylamine in its effect, and felt a lot like MDMA, except there was no rush but a constant surge of euphoria. The feeling made my body feel hot and serotonergic, very much like E. What surprised me the most is that the trip felt so clean and natural and not plant-like at all. What I mean by that is, it didn't feel like a mixture of alkaloids and toxic substances that were causing the effects, like some plant-based entheogens do, but it was clear to me that the primary effects were caused by a single compound. In other words, it felt like I'd taken a pill of some kind. The closed-eye visuals were a little cheesy and resembled the symbols on playing cards. There were small spade and club symbols in blue, green, red and yellow, all changing colour and morphing and rippling whilst everything else in my mind was black. By late afternoon, the peak had passed and started coming down. By the evening, I felt virtually normal, although a bit tripped out in the brain, but not much. But the one thing that was clear to me was that mescaline is very different to LSD. Acid can make me feel totally fried after a trip and really screw with my mind for a few days, but that was not the case with mescaline. When the effects had passed, I felt normal and sane, and I could even eat well by the evening and slept well that night too. Would I do it again? Without a doubt. Next time I would keep the dosage similar, but maybe to go about 10 to 12, but not any more than that. But it won't be for a year or two at least. I feel like the path in front of me is clear and I know where I'm going now. To those that are interested in what this cactus could do for them, I have this advice. Set aside a weekend that you can just relax without the need to do anything in particular. Be somewhere where you don't have to cross busy roads or interact with strangers, and do not plan on driving. Very bad idea. Take it in a natural setting, not in a club or at a rave, as it's not a party drug. And lastly, have someone that you can call if you get into any type of trouble. Someone that has experience in these matters for the best. With the above attention to setting, you will help yourself feel safer than you might if you just go at it randomly, as in an intoxicated space. Something as simple as telling the time or finding your way when you are lost can prove very challenging and create undue stress. Stay safe and good luck. San Pedro, unique from mushrooms, LSD, PCP or Jimson weed, is a gentle brush of mescaline, my all-time favourite psychedelic. Mushrooms, in my opinion, are too much of a tease, a pleasant, very enjoyable buzz. LSD is very good, a controlled chemical trip, but it too often occurs that acid leads to the fear and the ominous vibes that lead a tripping mind into a paranoid funk. PCP is not really for me, and Jimson weed was just plain madness, a 16-hour vacation from sanity. But mescaline is the laid-back, but at the same time, extremely psychedelic drug to which I give the award. Mescaline in its purest form is, of course, far better than the San Pedro peyote. However, at least for me, pure mescaline has become frustratingly hard to find these days, only surfacing in a several-week period every 5 to 6 months. So last week, I settled for the disgusting cactus slime, I bought a San Pedro cactus from a little shop on the edge of Austin. It was about 2 feet, a little son of a bitch, but it was going to have to do. So first, I skinned it. I've done this plenty of times before, and find that freezing the cactus in little sugar-covered chunks is the best way to get her done. Then I chopped it up, rolled it in sugar, and put it in the freezer. My parents are very cool, so I don't got to worry about them getting in my business. If I don't steal my mum's beer or my dad's weed, then my stuff is safe and sound. So I went to my senior prom, forgot about the cactus for a few days, and then on Tuesday I decided, what the hell, I'll go out into the woods and trip after school today. When school let out, I hopped into my truck and drove all the way across the street to my house. I grabbed the cactus out of the freezer and set out for an adventure. I don't normally trip during the daylight hours, but hey, I didn't care in the slightest. I drove to a nature preserve of about 200 acres, parked my truck and set off. I was equipped with 2 feet of San Pedro, a water bottle of orange juice and one of water, goggles, swimming trunks, a beach towel, a pair of garden gloves, 6 bananas and a kiwi, as well as my pipe and 2 grams of blueberry bud. I walked a forest path to a nice little swimming hole under a small waterfall, a beautiful spot surrounded by trees and moss-covered rocks. It was a wonderful place to enjoy nature in all her wonder as I began to trip. One of mescaline's most mystical charms is its ability to place you at one with your surroundings, or more accurately, at one with the earth. I laid out the towel in a nice shady patch of grass next to the water and sat down. Upon opening my backpack, I first took out the cactus, then the orange juice and the kiwi. Sitting cross-legged on the towel, I began to swallow down large hunks of the bittersweet cactus sugar and wash them down with gulps from the juice. After about 5 minutes, I had cleaned up on that cactus. It was in my belly and I felt like gagging, but the juice and the kiwi helped out. After I got over the nausea, I took out my pipe and a nice little nug to fill it with. I smoked for a while and got to feeling pretty high. Then, I set off on a scenic walk to some cliffs above the swimming hole and looked out over the woodland. It wasn't until about 45 minutes later that the mescaline began to sneak itself into my consciousness. I was sitting back on the towel in a state of stone meditation, a peaceful way of preparing for this sort of earthy trip, when I was brought back to reality by the first gentle touches of the drug. Tiny tingles of electricity were running through my veins, and a light feeling occurred in my head. At this point I took off my shoes and socks and waded out into the ankle-deep shallows and wondered at the sensation of the cool water and rough sand between my toes. I knew these things were becoming enhanced by the mescaline inside me. About 30 minutes later, the forest stood quiet with unknown anticipation. Then, a slight rustle stopped a bird in its tracks. Movement behind the bushes, ever so small, caused a squirrel to run for the trees. And suddenly, I burst from the bushes with a freshly carved spear, stick with a pointed end, held high in my hands. My primal instincts had taken over, and I decided to just let it flow. It was not insanity, but rather calculated madness that possessed me to do this. A rush of energy that could only be satisfied in the hunt. I ran around in the woods, seeing bizarre but natural flickerings in the shadows, hunting an imaginary but all too real prey. After a while at this point, I was at full body trip, but had not experienced more than a hint of visuals. I went back to my little spot and lit it up again. There we go, I was tripping now. The rays of late afternoon light glistened and seemed to weave translucent patterns in the air. A blue, transparent film of reflection hovered a foot above the water's surface, and all things around me swayed to an unknown, but all too familiar tune of perfect harmony. I saw things all around me in magnified radiance and altered coloration, and I knew that God was here. And this force of energy inside me and all things that moved around me in their instinctual routines was his ultimate masterpiece. Now, I'm not a very religious person at all. I believe all the separate sects of religion are just another means by which we can differentiate ourselves from one another, just another means of division and hostility. But I do believe, when I look at the wonders around me, that there is a God. And when I sat tripping and pondering the contours of this beauty, I gained some instinctual knowledge that the creator of all this innocent acceptance and harmony did not wish for us to do anything but to gaze in wonder at what we have been given and to be at one with it. The sun was burning down on me as the trip intensified. It was getting quite hot and I decided to take a swim. I stripped off my shorts and boxers and stood up straight, enjoying them warm from the soft breeze blowing across my naked body. It was soothing, and as I slipped into my swim shorts I saw lines of interweaving colours swirling around me, and patterns of sunlight making parts of the ground light up with a fire-like intensity. I got into the water and instantly became one with it. My body became a flowing river as I danced as one with the water's fluid current, I put on my goggles and examined with fascinated curiosity the underwater landscape of colourful harmony. Sometimes I would almost forget to come up and breathe, and after a while, I felt it necessary that I be nude. So I slid off my shorts and began to propel myself speedily around in the cool water, marvelling at the strange sensations as the pull of the water caressed my body and I began to dance underwater in slow motion. Later, I sat up on a rock at the top of a nearby hill and felt an overwhelming sense of tranquility. I relieved myself off the edge of a cliff and watched the sky being painted many different vibrant colours by an invisible hand. The trip was subsiding, but the coloration of the sunset before me was still very enhanced, and I still felt the vibrations of nature. I was truly at one with the world, just where I needed to be. It was a great experience, and I wish the same to all who strive to explore its mysteries.